Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Welcome. It is July 16th, and you know what? We are within weeks of wrapping up season 2 of the Voice of Bold Business Radio, talking about an accomplishment for this team to have 2 shows a week for 2 years, and this is program 235 of those 2 seasons. And we're talking Death of the Salesman today. And you know what? I like this topic. I like this topic a lot because there are so many of us that are afraid of sales, or we're really good at sales and we don't know why everybody else is afraid of sales. And the thing is, everything is changing so fast. Technology, tools, the way we think people actually buy versus does it really change how people buy? It's just the perception of what they're hearing us say changes. I mean, there's so many different things there. Now, when it comes to technology, though, it comes to business software, even business to consumer software, we are in a time and a place where changing customer expectations is happening almost at the same speed at which the technology that they're interested in is changing. So how do we do sales? How do we do relationships? How do we create and have active sales funnels when we can't keep up with our technology, and now we can't even keep up with the changing expectations of our customers? Well, here to tell us that today is Greg Dickinson, and I'm going to introduce you to him in just a second. Before we get started, I want to make sure you know you're in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as leaders have regarding technology and customer expectations. See why he's on the show, right? And of course, the ever quickly changing markets that we face today in business. This program is about what it means to reach our short-term goals while positioning ourselves for long-term success. All right. Greg Dickinson is the founder of Omedym. And Omedym is my demo spelled backwards. So when you're hearing us say it, now you can visualize the word as well. It's software to transform how we think about demos by helping software companies capture more early stage prospects faster and quicker, as well as accelerate the sales process and increase the conversion rate all at the same time is what Omedym is for. And we're talking Death of the Salesman today, aren't we, Greg?
Yes, Jess. Thanks for having me today. It's a great day. Great day to be here.
It's a fantastic day. I don't know what the weather's like there, but it's actually kind of humid here, which is unusual. And I came prepared with 2 cups of hot tea this morning. Don't ask me why, but before I knew it, I had 2 different teacups. And I'm like, well, I'll just have them both ready today while we're chatting, because I know you're going to have a lot to say. And I drink tea when I'm contemplating and thinking and learning, that I must admit. So for everybody listening, we have to actually talk about the title right here, Death of the Salesman. Now, this is something that I read when I was doing some research for the show. You said, you know what? We're in the place where there is going to be no more salesmen. And I want to understand, and I know our audience does too, what are the signals that are telling us that this change is actually here now?
Yeah, so I think there's been a couple of transitions that have been building, right? In the sense that today, undisputedly, the buyer has changed. We hear that all the time. Buyers change. They call it the modern buyer, the digital buyer. And when starting Omedym, I asked the question, so what? Like what does that really mean to me if I'm in B2B sales, I'm in B2B as a company, what does it mean that the buyers change? And there's 3 substantial facts backed up by research that really address this. Number 1, when polled by Gartner Research, 77% of all buyers said they're dissatisfied with the buying process, right? So they don't like the way they're being treated. 77%. Now listen, in today's world, tell me where you get 77 people to agree on anything. It doesn't happen. That's how bad the problem is. Right?
I
Come on.
like how you put that. Yes,
Come
exactly.
on, right? Number two is that when these same buyers were polled, they have emphatically said, we are now no longer dependent, we're independent. The times have changed. Back when IBM was selling, or back in the 90s when I was selling, there was a need. If I wanted information on that new car, on that television, on that vacation home, on that home, I had to go to you, the salesperson, to get every bit of information. Today, that's no longer true. And how did that manifest itself? The buyers only spend 17% of their entire buying journey with a salesperson. If they're looking at 3 vendors, that means each vendor gets 6% of their time. Now, again, this is research that's coming out. And number 3 is that, gosh, it shouldn't be a surprise, but when people buy things, they actually have a process. They have what's called jobs to get complete. They have to select the right vendor. They have to do validation, consensus building, requirements, justification. Well, they do majority of this on their own. And where our sales investments, marketing software, sales software, have not been there to enable that independent, disconnected buyer to get their job done. So that's where that 77% dissatisfaction comes from. So what we're seeing is that the influence and the control that the salesperson has is changing. Not to say they're going to be eliminated completely, but what the role they need to play, if they do not change, they don't change the way they address that different buyer, there's going to be winners and losers, right? You can look at any shift, subscription economy, there are winners and losers. Client server to SaaS, winners and losers. You name it, right? We have example after example of how things have shifted, and those that are not changing, gosh, they may not be here tomorrow.
All right. So this is just a concept of it's innovation in a different form is what we're looking at. We're looking at the innovation of somebody evaluating technology and recognizing all of us are wearing more than one hat. We are stretched thin. We don't have time for a lot of conversation. We've got to do a lot of research to do some weeding out, which means, those original first, I don't even know how many steps. I'm going to the first set of steps that we would always have, building a relationship, choosing somebody we wanted to hear from, to learn from, for technology we were interested in, is obsolete already. So our barrier to entry for sales and cultivating those relationships is at a new level. And we hear people talk about relationship sales, and you're right, the modern buyer. We have all of these other phrases that come into play. And it's because why? People are doing research on their own. They need it to fit their way. They don't want to have to fit into somebody else's way, right? We got to make sure they're looking for somebody to fit their peg, not their peg into a square hole. They want somebody to come to them with that, correct? And so if we're talking about autonomous buyers, our sales cycle is impacted. So with this new level of where the bar is to actually have sales, we already know if we're trying to do certain things, well, guess what? We're obsolete. So we have to start where we're not obsolete anymore in that relationship cycle with customers. And from that, that changes our sales cycle.
Yes. So think about it from anything that you've bought recently, a TV, a car, booked a trip, whatever. You can now on your own do all the research. That's the innovation you're talking about. The internet has made it easier, accessible to get a lot of information. There are a ton of websites. Pick any industry. I'm going to buy accounting software. There are numerous blogs, posts, G2 Crowd, places that people can go to get information. And gosh, that's what we want to do. Number one. Number two, you also hit on something very important. Today, because of technology, I would argue, we're busier than ever before.
Yeah.
So what we find is that a lot of people want to do that investigation before 9 and after 6, especially the product experience. They don't want to say, oh, gee, Jess, yes, I want to come see your software. And, oh, you're available at 2:00 in the afternoon. That doesn't work for it. Think about trying to sell to a small doctor's office.
Right. When they're in the middle of having patients at that time.
They're not going to do that. So
Right.
I think the notion of our lives, the way that technology has made our days, right? No lunch breaks. We just kind of work straight through it. The fact that you can get information before 9, after 6. So when you say the sales cycle has changed, I want to actually tell you that the marketing has changed as well. If you go to a website today, right, 96% of all websites, if you want to see the product, they're asking this buyer to fill out a form. They click on the request a demo button.
Right.
And what comes up? I don't care if you call it request a demo, see a demo, live demo, schedule a demo. It all leads to a form.
Yeah.
An MQL. Well, guess what? The bounce rate, not my number, research, the bounce rate of that form is 85%. Buyers are voting with their pocketbook. I don't like that. I don't want to do that. You're raising your hand, right? Because we all immediately, your audience just went, they just shivered, right? Because they all know how uncomfortable that process is. Early in the buying cycle, I want to get some information. I'm looking at 10 vendors. I want to narrow it down to 3. I want to do it on my own. I want to learn some information. And you're forcing me actually into a process that is broken. It's designed perfectly well for that buyer 20 years ago that had to go to the company to get the information. So we as software companies are still aligned for that buyer that existed 20, 25 years ago that was dependent on us. So that starts, your sales cycle starts much differently now because that requested demo process is broken, and it doesn't have to be that way. You can allow through technology that buyer to experience the product, learn, get their top 5, 10 questions answered.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they've gotten to the point where they say, hey, Jess, I like what I've heard so far. I'd like to form that relationship. I'd like to talk to you, but you're right. We're starting a lot later, right, in that journey, in that buying cycle or customer journey than we did previously. Much different.
And that goes back to one of the stats that you shared at the beginning around the amount of time that somebody spends with a salesperson is drastically reduced, right? It's what and you're going to correct me, I know if I mess this up, but I heard, or I'm pulling out of my recollection, 17% of the buyer's cycle is spent with a salesperson, all salespeople. So that means you were saying if there were 3 salespeople, each person is getting 6% of that time. So it's what we're doing with 6% of that time that makes the difference. And now, does Omedym help like leverage in so that 6% is face-to-face relationship building, or to lead into that? Or is that part of that 6%?
A little of everything, right?
Okay.
So your numbers are exactly right. So now if your salesperson has 6%,
yep.
If the company is using our technology, that buyer is already educated. They're much more educated than they were before because they've had the opportunity to use our technology to do an autonomous demo, a self demo. They ask questions. It's like an Alexa experience. They ask questions. Our software talks back to them. Yes, it does workflow. Here's how we do reporting. So that buyer is much more aware of what value you bring, what benefits you bring. So now, number 2, all that activity, right? Your engagement with that demo, that autonomous demo, our demo, is saved. So the salesperson now knows, oh, Jess was here. Mm-hmm. She looked at these topics. She asked these questions. So now when I have that 6%, whether it's 6 minutes, 6 hours, or 6%, I, as a salesperson, am much more educated on what you're looking for, and you as a buyer are much more educated on what we do. So let's skip the 25 minutes of, hi, I'm Greg, I'm from Omedym, here's where our headquarters are, here's our logos, here's how we were founded. Well, you already know all that. You've gotten that data. That's not providing me as a buyer value. Let's get to, I was looking at your demo, looking at your product. I'm trying to solve these 3 problems. I understand how it does it. I understand it can do it. Could you, salesperson, tell me how it does it? Specifically, get into the weeds of how your software solves, again, using that as an example, these 3 problems. That's a much more engaging, educational, informative, and valuable conversation for the salesperson and the buyer to have. And I think we all would agree that if you went to a car lot to look for the car, you look at someplace, and the salesperson knew nothing about your situation or your car, you're going to blow them off, right? You're looking for value. You're looking for a relationship where you learn something new. You are able to grow as a buyer. And that's what our software allows, is it brings both parties to the table in a much different place later in the journey, but in a much better place for both parties to engage and have a meaningful conversation. So it's exciting. It's new. It's exciting.
Right. So, okay, my brain is all over the place and I'm trying to formulate what comes next. And I'm thinking about the data you were talking about. I'm thinking about the productivity. I mean, what I hear in all of this is when we're using our data and we're creating a way that we can collect data that is unobtrusive, we're allowing a person to have their own experience and learn about them at the same time. So they can have a more customized experience, at which point in time it's human to human.
Yes, yes. So let's take a step back for your audience. So
Yeah.
what Omedym does, right? So if you were to and our software simply takes your everyday content, a PowerPoint presentation, the software demonstration, you record it, upload it into our platform, and once you do that, it becomes, I'll use the analogy, Alexa on top of YouTube. So today,
That's awesome.
video is mostly consumed by people that push play, pause, fast forward, and rewind. Very analog, very not modern, because we don't have 60 minutes to sit through and try to find the 7 seconds or 7 minutes in the video we want to listen to. Our software with the Alexa experience is you walk up to that user interface and you say, does your software have parallel workflow? Does it help my marketing team generate more leads? Does it help sales X? First of all, it finds the right video. And second, it finds the exact moment in the video where that problem is being talked about, which is very important because we hear and see at the same time. So to your point, if I am a buyer, first of all, every experience is personalized. How many times have you sat through a software demo, 60 minutes, and there's 4 or 5 different buyers on the phone with a different point of view, right?
Yes.
The financial buyer wants to know about X, the procurement buyer wants to know about Y, the business buyer wants to know about Z, and yet all of them sit through this painstaking 60-minute explanation where maybe the finance person just has 4 questions. Once they're answered, they can go about their day. Again, talking about that busy day. So the technology allows for that personalized demo for everybody.
Mhm.
And to your point, it allows that data to be captured so your salesperson is much more productive, right? Because now they're not guessing, they're not hoping, they're going to that buyer with, I understand you had questions about how it helps your marketing organization do X or Y. Let's talk about that. Not, let me throw off at the top and see which one of those topics you're interested in. So innovation technology is moving to the forefront because obviously a video is very valuable. I say this 9 times more retainable than reading something, of listening to and seeing it. But gosh, the technology to get at that video of play, pause, fast forward, and rewind is very archaic, right? I mean, gosh, the first MTV video used that technology. Right now, it's how many years ago, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now I'm
Oh,
saying I'm just going to head and tell you my age.
well, that's okay, because I remember when MTV first came out, and I
Yes.
was as a kid. So it's all good. We're dating ourselves and our
All
love
right.
of technology here.
That's right. That's right. Innovation happens.
It does. Okay. Now I'm going to totally it's going to sound like a tangent to you potentially, Greg. I'm thinking about non-technology businesses for just a minute. And what we see when we see website conversion things, when we see here's how do we get more reach, when we're generating leads for customers, even if you don't have a technology or a product to demo, because I do believe that Greg's product is something that is for technology, but it's technology for non-technology products as well, right, Greg?
Yes. So every company that has, whether it's you sell one or two things, product or service. Even
Thank
if
you.
you're selling a service, people want to understand it. How did you go about it? What's your methodology? They want to meet you. You're going to be
Yep.
you're going to be implementing their software, so they want to see you. They want to hear you. They want to see all those attributes about you that are best represented in a video. It's quick, it's to the point. It can be searched, and it's retained. So I think you're right. We've got a client right now that actually is giving back to the world with their leadership and their mentoring and things of that nature. And gosh, that's not a product or a service. It's just information they want to share. They have 380 videos that used to be on YouTube. I couldn't even find them. Now someone can go to their URL and type in a question about mentorship or leadership or building a startup, and it brings you to the right video. So they're using it in a whole nother area to be able to convey information much quicker. Because at the end of the day, product service is all about speed to knowledge, speed to understanding, and clarity.
With this concept of speed to knowledge, you were talking about that bounce rate, right? 85% bounce rate when they have to click on my demo and fill out a form. I believe, now I do not have the statistics, but I have the experience and the feedback of clients that I help that are evaluating programs that are not working. And in every single case, programs, marketing programs that are not working for them online are when they hit a form. When they're providing a form to somebody that they want to know, that bounce rate is incredibly high. And so that's the other thing I really wanted to highlight here in the first part of the show is that whatever you're doing, how you're asking for information and when you're asking for information and the purpose of getting information about somebody who's interested or researching can make or break what happens next.
Yes. So like again, 20 years ago, if I wanted information, right, I had to pay the price. The price was the form. But today, let's go back to the car example. If you're going to go buy a car, I don't need to call the dealer and ask how much. I can find that information in 4 or 5 or 6 different locations. Guess what? It's the same about your software, right? They can go get information about your company, where you are, that information. It doesn't need to be gated. It's interesting. If you look at the Wall Street Journal, they used to charge for their digital subscriptions 100%. Then they started doing a model that we recommend our customers use, which is, Jess, here is 5%, 10%, 25, 30% of the information you're looking for without a form. Digital content that you can read at the Wall Street Journal. But after you have consumed a certain amount of that, we're going to ask you for your email. Then we're going to ask you for your title. Then we're going to, and so we tell our customers, give them something that is of value to them, that early stage demo experience of understanding your PowerPoint presentation, a webinar, and a demo. And then after they've been engaged for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you make the call, right? Number of questions, whatever you want to use as a parameter. Then say, hey, we noticed you've been using the software for a while in the automated demo. We really would like to give you some more information if necessary. Can we get your email, right? Then that person doesn't feel like the first thing you did was slam the door and lock it in front of them and say, in order to get in, you have to do X. It's kind of the way, we are. And basically, guess what? If you as a buyer, you as a consumer find what they have to offer valuable, you're willing to participate in that process. If on the other hand, you don't, you'll leave. And I think that that's a very valuable thing for a business to know about. Because then if those people that actually can think about the value, if I knew Jess came, participated in an online demo on Monday, came back on Wednesday and did it some more, and then Thursday did it again, and then registered. Yep. Wow. Like I know buyer intent. I know Jess has invested 30 minutes of time, asked 11 questions, and then invited one of her peers to join in and understand more about what was happening. Gosh, I'm a much better educated company about my buyer and my buyer intent. And by the way, I now have a happy buyer. And going back to that study, 77% of buyers that aren't happy, when you're not happy, guess what you do? You run for the hills. You don't like walk yourself through it. I'm going to walk over fire. I'm going to leave and go someplace else. So how do we work together, right? And help that buyer to become a customer. That's the goal. It's not how many white papers can you get downloaded. It's how many of those visitors become customers. That's really the metric. Sorry, that's the metric.
That's the metric. So here we have a question from Peter, #VBB Radio. He is asking, what do you see as the biggest changes in pre-sales and after sales that affects today's buyer's journey?
Yeah. So I'm a pre-sales person by trade. So I got to say that because I'm proud of it. In 1997, when I joined Ariba, that's what I did. I loved it. Loved the product demo. And I think I talk to pre-sales leaders all the time, and they point to 2 things. One is that the product, because of the cloud, because of our phones, because of because the notion of trials and product led, the product has become very important to the buyer much earlier in the sales cycle. So a lot of pre-sales people are being asked to show up and throw up demos where they're just saying, hey, get on the phone and quickly, Jess is the best, she's qualified, which she's not, and let's just give a demo. So it's squeezing that pre-sales resource to do things that really are not the best use of their time. They're professional. It's a hard job, right? You got to be really good at what you do to understand someone's problems and convert it to software. So they're being constrained in that manner, number one. Number two, I was at a meetup about 3 weeks ago, 40 people, every one of them's hiring. So there's not only that's caused a constraint in hiring. So the other thing that's happened to pre-sales is now they're starting to ask, I'm not sure I like this. Matter of fact, I know I don't. They're starting to ask inside sales, BDRs, SDRs to give the demo. Gosh, you hired them to prospect and to set meetings, and now you want them to demo. So I think those are the two changes, is that pre-sales now, right, is being pushed into positions where it doesn't use their resources, and then the demo is being, kind of used as in a wrong manner.
That's interesting. And that makes me think of, so they're trying to keep, so there's still a separation of sales and marketing there, where what I hear you say is one of the changes is that the pre-sales is, and the lead generation and the appointment setting, that function, while it's changing, is actually more of a marketing role now than it is a sales role.
Yeah, so it's up front, right? I won't mention the name of the company, but one of those companies that records 3 million or 1 million sales calls produced a statistic that said 75% of all buyers on the very first call within 2 minutes asked to see the product, right? And if you don't, they leave, right? So now they're kind of morphing that demand gen and the product. And so that's where we're saying, well, gosh, wouldn't it better just let them do an autonomous, self-driven, personalized demo that you can do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it is your best and brightest, by the way. So if you've got a pre-sales constraint and you're asking inside sales to give demos, wouldn't it be better to take your best and brightest A players, give the best demo, record it, make that available to every single solitary buyer? You only get one first impression. We all know that a bad product demo can mean gone. They're not coming back. I didn't like the product. I didn't do what I thought. I'm leaving. So we see a lot more of the product being in the early stages. You kind of said a little while ago, the funnel, if you will, and used to be, if you followed the 6, 8, 9, 10 stages, the demo was way down. Now, right, product led and trials have moved the product experience to be one of the first things that potential buyers want to engage with. Again, innovation, things are changing. You have to adopt your sales strategies and your go-to-market strategies to leverage this and to take advantage and work with this new buyer.
You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 235, Death of the Salesman. I'm your host, Jess Dewell, and you can join in this conversation. Hashtag VBB radio at reddirection.com. Join in, keep those questions coming. I have a few more that we haven't gotten to yet, and we will. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
Wow. Our guest today, Greg Dickinson, founder of Omedym, is sharing so much information about sales, about how it's changing. I can see the ways that marketing is fitting into this and that it's becoming somewhat blended. And when we're talking about demos, when we're talking about allowing people to get, you said something great earlier, Greg, it was the speed to information, right? When we're talking about speed to information to help people with their research, that is the best thing that we can do as a business to reach our customers most effectively in their full scheduled days. And I also want to just jump back in, Greg, if you're ready. I want to pump out another question if we can.
Certainly.
Awesome. All right. So this question is from Kelly because it ties into what we've been talking about. And Kelly used radio at reddirection.com. She is asking, what would be the best way to meet customers where they are, since their journey nowadays looks more like a maze than a linear path?
Oh gosh, I want to meet Kelly after this call because that's perfect. Right? Perfect question. So one of the findings of this notion that buyers have jobs and they've got validation, consensus, product requirements, justification, etc., is they do not buy in a linear fashion. As much as our sales cycles are this linear chevrons of step 1 through step 8 and et cetera, buyers jump all over the place because they have product requirements and they go and validate, oh, Josh, that changes their product requirements. They go back to that step. And then there's a justification and gosh, we found out the software is going to be more expensive than we thought and we didn't realize it's so much services. So now that changes justification. So when you are able to provide what we call a buyer enablement platform where the product information, the product demo, that what the customers already asked for is in one digital portal, they can engage with that whenever they want. And, one of the coolest things I heard our customers say to us one day is, Greg, Friday afternoon at 4:00, the buyers are getting together to have a collaboration, a conversation about buying this software. Gosh, I wish we could be in the room because who's carrying the day when you're disconnected? You're only getting 6% of the time. So here, that buyer enablement platform can be what that buying team relies on. So that maze that she's talking about, depending on what job they have, validation, consensus building, they can come back. And if someone asks a question, yeah, I don't think software company XYZ has parallel workflows and you can add watchers. Well, let's go find out. Rather than guessing, which is bad for you as a seller, let's engage with that demo and ask it, do you have parallel workflow? It shows the parallel workflow and the team goes, check. They now have that. Let's move on. What else do we need to validate? You're in the room, which is pretty powerful for any salesperson to say, I'm in the room with the decision makers. They were lucky to be at the table with the decision makers. So great question. And I think that's a great analogy, this maze that buyers go through because buyers are risk adverse today. There's been a lot of bad experiences with software. They look for consensus building. No one wants to, Jess or Greg's not going to raise your hand and say, I'll do this and, deal with the consequences, right? So It's a lot different. And I think that she's hit the nail on the head with that question. Thanks for the question.
It's a fabulous question. All right. And I'm thinking about the engagement piece. And I've heard you say many times, all of the people that have a say or a need or a consideration when it comes to choosing software. And that's always been hard for a salesperson to be able to navigate because the person they may be talking to on the phone and getting 6% of their time they're not getting 6% of every single person in the decision-making process or the research process. They're getting 6% of one person's time usually because when it gets to one-to-one, everything else has been done. And what I am truly enjoying about this conversation is that we're bypassing the limitations of that single connection by considering the use of technology, integrating technology for digital transformation in a way that will help us as business owners that may not have a need for an inbound salesperson, but could benefit and maximize a salesperson's time, or to augment marketing's efforts by using a tool like this and increasing their productivity. All the way around. It's not, yes, it's engagement with customers, but I'd like to also put the focus on being able to achieve more as a business by considering this. Yes. Because it's a big investment to use technology and to choose something and say, here's what we're going to do in our digital transformation in the next 3 years. Here's how we are going to stay on top of and be adaptable to remain competitive as we go forward. Because what I hear from you, Greg, about this type of technology, this type of change in a process is really, it's not replacing a role. It's changing the role so that there is more opportunity for connection. But that also means we have to have people that have more experience, more soft skills, more willingness to think about each customer's specific situation based on the data that is coming in from this technology, right?
Yes.
And so for me, my question is when I'm thinking about sales, because a lot of the companies I work with have always been, even if they're 5 or 7 years old, it's a founder sales process, and they're trying to switch out of that, or they've switched out of it, but they're not having the same type of results. And I see a technology like this really supporting that shift in Absolutely. How a company grows.
Yeah. At the end of this call today, a half hour at this end, I have a call with a founder
Yeah.
that is selling to small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he called me is he said, Greg, 20 minutes is all I need to demo to my customers. I have a very big close rate after that. I can't grow anymore because I'm not going to do 24 demos in a day, right? So if I did one per hour, that's 8 customers a day. I can't get to it. And so I hired someone. They're not as good as I am. I couldn't, then I got to bring up to speed. I got to train them, et cetera. So they built the sandbox with our technology in order to say, could that buyer have that first, and I asked him, I said, is it the same demo? He goes, Greg, it's the same demo every time. Our software is not that sophisticated, and the buyer can grasp it very quickly. By the way, we do get a lot of demands for, can you do this on Saturday? Can you do this on Sunday? Because we're selling to small business owners, across the United States. So to that point of your founder, I can now do a digital transformation and get that buyer engaged autonomously, right? And as a marketing tool, if the bounce rate is 85%, I kind of call that in a little bit of slang, that's the dark web. Those are the anonymous visitors. You have no idea who they are. Well, let's just grab 20% of those or 30% of those. How would that impact your business? A digital transformation to cater to those that will not give you their name day one, the bouncers. How do I, go to those? And then your salespeople now can concentrate and focus less on features and functions and more on how to drive value, right? How to add credibility. That's who we want to deal with. That's who we want to buy from. If we get someone on the phone and they're just giving us the script, we know it pretty darn quick. So the digital transformation, it's where your buyers are, and you need to align yourself with that. It's if you look at some of the statistics around, conversion rates of leads, number of opportunities, there's a great statistic put out by a company called Price Intelligently in Boston that said that over the last 5 years, customer acquisition costs are up 55%. They polled 3,000 SaaS businesses. 55% increase in CAC. If you're selling a low ACV product, you may actually be in a death spiral, because if you got to continue to put marketing resources, A, to get more leads, B, salespeople to kind of scale, go digital. Mm-hmm. You're not replacing anybody. What you're doing is you're making them more effective and more efficient, because you're giving them, for the first time, instead of more money in CRM or more money in marketing automation, or heck, I can go now and tell where Jess went to college, and I can tell she's on our website, all those tools. Now what I'm doing is I'm enabling my buyer in a guided selling mode, which is where they are. So let's meet them and let's have that sale be much more of a partnership and a relationship, as opposed to, right, all the things you talked about, gatekeepers and all that. That was 30 years ago, 20 years ago when I went through training.
And the thing is, we naturally, every single one of us is now a gatekeeper, whether we're the decision maker or not. And depending on our role, we may have an idea of what's going to turn on or off the person in that role to continue conversation.
Yeah.
But it's still a wild guess. And when we have such a small percentage of attention of theirs in the entire process, more than ever before, we have to understand that, and it can't be a guess anymore. Yeah, and right. So to me, that's one of the biggest things about sales change. We can't guess. We have to recognize our assumptions. And so this actually leads into Liam's question, #VBB Radio. He wants to hear more about your demo video product, Greg. What makes it stand out? Because it's tough to have video content that stands out.
Yeah, so I think what makes it stand out first and foremost is that it's not really a technology as much as how do you use it. So first and foremost, the ability for you to ask a question and have it find the right, video. Think about your experience of going to YouTube, want to do something. You got to look through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, kind of videos to find. Maybe you find the right one, maybe you don't, right? And so that's unique in the sense of I ask a question and it brings you to the right section. Number 2, the seller can kind of stack the deck and provide what we call suggestions or recommended questions on, here's what we think you may want to look at based on trending, based on data. We can hear some of the top 15 or 20. So you're giving that browsing buyer, the buyer that doesn't want to search, they want to browse. And then also our software captures all the major topics. So if you want to look for workflow, you click on the topic workflow, and bing, it brings you to the 4 or 5 examples of where you're talking about workflow or reporting. So it's taking underlying technology. And if I could, confess for a second, the idea came to me when I had 2 boys in college, and they came home on Thanksgiving. They said, Dad, we take these online classes. They're 90 minutes long for 14 weeks, and we want to study. Well, as a father, my ears got really big, right? Study. Oh my gosh, you want to do that? So, I said to them very simply, I said, what do you mean? What's your problem? He said, well, Dad, let's just say we want to understand gross margin calculation in finance. Like, what week did she talk about that? And what section of the 90 minutes? I'm like, well, just search it. Like, okay, how do you do that? And that's when the light bulb went off with my demo experience and this notion of, here is a person that wants to learn. They're sitting through 90-minute lecture, find the right week, and then fast forward and rewind. Can't do it, right? Because you're listening. Maybe they wrote gross margin calculation on the board. You could see it, but it makes it hard. It takes up a lot of time. So now, right, the technology, that experience for your buyers to the question of what makes it unique is no one's going to sit through a 60-minute video. The average watch time on YouTube is 2 minutes and 37 seconds. We all like snippets. We all like to be able to get something and move on and get something. So that's what makes this experience useful. And to repeat what we said earlier, the average buying team, 6, 7 people. Jess is going to say, hey, I want to understand the marketing value. Greg's going to come in and want to know the CEO value. And
Right.
the technical buyers want to know the security aspects. That gives a unique experience that they can get their information personalized for them and, move on. And then, kind of those experiences very useful, right, for them. That's what makes it unique, much different than, playing a 1-minute explainer video that just kind of is music and it's high level and they're not getting the information, the data, the answers to their questions. So thanks for the question.
It's a great question. Okay. Here's what I heard. And by the way, this is the hardest thing for me when I'm evaluating anything. I will go off of recommendations over anything else or any of my own research because I recognize my personal limitation for how far I want to dig into a product, how far I want to dig into an option. And I will totally own it. And I can give a real life example that has nothing to do with technology. In our house, we have an 8-year-old, and clipping his fingernails is the hardest thing to get him to do. Okay. We were like, do it yourself. What has he done? He's hidden every single pair of clippers so he doesn't have to do this thing. So I'm out going, I got to do this. I got to get 6 pairs of nail clippers and hide all of them but one so I can just replenish it until I can figure out where he's holding the stash.
Right.
Right.
That's
and so
classic.
I went online and I did a little bit of research and I'm not going to say bored, but I got overwhelmed really quick because you'd think there aren't that many options for nail clippers, but there are. So here I am reading some reviews, and about the 4th product in, I'm at my limit, ready to just have to move on because I don't really want to take the time to have to research nail clippers of all things, right? We all have those things. We're either going to like researching it or we're not. So this is something, especially when we're not interested or we're pressed for time or we have an external pressure that's going to make us feel distracted at some point in that process. I went to the reviews and somebody said, this one feels flimsy and you can't really feel it clipping your nails. It feels like it's bending your nails. So get this one instead. I was done. I was ready to hear. I listened to this stranger's response and I went and I bought that other pair of nail clippers and I was done. And it felt really good. And then they show up. Greg, they show up. And my husband goes, what is this? This is the coolest packaging ever. It came in a metal case. It came in a special bag, right? So you have all of these things and they were very beautifully, they were engineered very nice. So when you're talking about industrial design, that mattered too. So somehow from this other guy's review, I got the right thing that also impressed my husband because of the way that it looks. And that's something he cares about. And Carter is so excited because they look so cool. He doesn't want to lose this pair of clippers. So somehow my process worked in this situation. It doesn't always work that way though.
Right.
What I hear you saying with demos, right? So whether it's information, whether it's technology. I mean, I have a client who, actually I have many clients who piecemeal the technology that they're using to be as digitally ready as possible. Yet there's a lack of integration of each of these tools, which means productivity in general is lowered. And so when they start to get to a point where I'm asking questions in this advisory way that I do, they're like, oh, I see an opportunity for increased productivity. Oh, I've got to go start doing some research about this. But they're doing 100 other things. My thing of, I'll own the fact at some point I just don't want to research anymore. Most of my clients are at the place where I don't know how I'm going to find time to research. And this is where you and what you're trying to solve and bring to the market with Omedym seems to be helping everybody's learning cycle, everybody's whatever's between their ears about what can we do, how much time do I have to get this done, and what can I learn. And I think that's the quickest piece because
Well, Jess, I think what you're saying is what you wanted was the right information to the right person at the right time. And what our
yes,
software allows for is, first of all, I could interject and say that a lot of our clients will put customer testimonials right in the private portal so that that buyer can engage with those, right? So that's
yeah,
kind of like a reference, but not as detailed as what's on your website. But
right,
when you are able, like, let's be honest, if you did a demo tomorrow with 9 buyers,
right,
the likelihood that they're going to ask the really tough questions that are really, really bothering them are slim to none. They're A, my boss is on the phone. B, I'm embarrassed. C, people don't like to ask questions, right? I mean, how many times
yeah,
you've been in a room where that,
yeah,
please raise your hand, ask a question, and everyone is timid and shy because, gosh, that may be a dumb question, et cetera, et cetera. Well,
right,
now you're in a group. The sales team is no longer on the phone. You're losing our product, the
yeah,
recorded demo that you took, in which you hear whatever questions were asked are now available for repeat. Think of that executive that says, hey, I want to go ahead and give you guys the green light for this project. I have these 4 questions. Well, trying to schedule that with a salesperson is hard, but you could say, here's the recorded demonstration of the 90-minute scripted demo they built just for us. You can engage. What were your 4 questions? Let's ask them, type them in or say them. And now that executive gets their information. So, and now as a team, what are you doing? You're collaborating. The team is saying, hey, we see that as a productivity game. Well, I don't know if that's a productivity game, but this could be a productivity game. As a group, right? You're collaborating because, like I said to you earlier, the buyers are, what's really happened in the business community is 20 years ago when you bought
yeah,
software, it was only for 3 or 4 people in a group, accounts payable, accounts receivable, the warehouse manager. Now,
right,
when you buy software, it touches so many more people because it's broad, right? Software companies have purposely made the touch points broader so they get more users. So now there's more people with an opinion or interjection, and you need to have a means of being able to collect that and either help that person become supportive if that person is quote unquote the naysayer or the gatekeeper. So I hear you loud and clear. You're doing it in the consumer world,
yeah,
relying on that piece of information interjected by a stranger in your company. You're going to rely on information that's interjected and collaborated during the validation or justification or the consensus stage
yes,
with your teammates, your associates.
yes, and oh my gosh, my brain is like in 5 different directions again. I knew that was going to happen with our conversation, and it was going to get to a point. It was going to be hard to get words out. And I'm thinking about most things. There's a fear to ask because it might be a stupid question. I actually think even more important than that is up there, which, by the way, that fear is very real and it fits there. I think people are worried that they don't know what questions to ask, which for me, in my case, is what I was doing with those nail clippers. I didn't know what questions to ask. And finally somebody goes, this is what it was like for me. And I'm like, that's exactly my problem with most of these things. I'm going to listen to you.
Yep.
And so what I hear you saying is on the technology side, right? When we're evaluating software for business productivity, for increasing sales, for making sure our conversions are at or where we want, to maximize our connection in that 6% of time that we have with prospective clients that choose to engage with us, is that we must take our technology and we must allow a space for them to figure out the questions that they need without us in the room. It takes the pressure off.
Yes, yes. So that's what, if you go to one of our customers that has this on their website, or go to my website, and you notice we don't have a requested demo. We have start your demo. If you go there, first of all, there's about 15 recommended questions that break the ice, right? Jess may not know all the questions to ask about this new technology. So here's a roadmap, a GPS for you to get started. Now, here's what happens. Once Jess has clicked on one or two of those questions, she hears, and another question comes to her, and she can then either look and see if it's covered in the topics or trending. What have other people asked that I can learn from? That's interesting, because you're peeling back that onion, and you want that buyer to understand the full breadth, of what your software can do. And it's kind of like, you look at trials as an example. A lot of companies have gone to trials. We love them, but the conversion rate on some trials less than 4%. Why? Because the buyer kind of gets in one place and doesn't know how to go left or how to go right. So I think there's a way to utilize technology to allow just to start off, put a toe in the water, gosh, on your own, right? And I don't think people think it's that it may, they think it's a dumb question. It's not really a dumb question. They just think it is. That fear is there. Right. When they're on their own, they're asking whatever they want. And then they learn more, they ask more, they learn more. Now all of a sudden their understanding of what you do in 30 minutes is much deeper and much wider than it was in that 60-minute demo. Think of that, right? Because that person got personal information, what they wanted, when they wanted, how they wanted it, without you as a salesperson. Sometimes we tend to interrupt.
I'm so glad you worked that in. I'm so glad you worked that in.
Right? I mean, come on. I'm talking about myself here, right? I'm guilty.
I am too. We want to keep the conversation moving. We want to figure out where things are going. We also recognize that sometimes silence is good and sometimes it's not. And that's a honed intuition that salespeople have. So I'll totally take your interruptions anytime, Greg.
Yeah.
I love it. What makes it bold? What makes it bold to recognize the current place where sales and business evolution is at, that we recognize that the way sales and the salesperson as we know it is changing?
Yeah. So I think you can look at metrics of your own company and begin to understand, are things transforming that you're not keeping up with? If your bounce rate, I had one client last week, I said 85. They said, no, that's not true. They went back, called me a week later, it's 93%, right? So do your own analysis of that engagement on your website, right? Are people participating in the content? Is marketing writing more and more content? Statistics show it has to be 3 times as long as it used to be to gain my attention, to keep me there, to dwell time and all those. And then look at, your sales, right? Kind of process. One of the tell signs that we see all the time is no decision rates are growing, because that buyer has jobs to do. The jobs don't get done. They don't buy. Did you lose? Yeah. Like you spent a lot of time working on that prospect and selling to them, and no decision. You didn't lose it to a competitor, which is good, but you lost it to no decision. It's no longer in your pipeline, or it was in your forecast and now it's not. So that's another kind of statistic and metric to look at that. Look at the number of opportunities, right? That your inside salespeople, how successful are they with that first meeting? So I think doesn't escape anyone's attention that we're all different and we're all, kind of want to buy different. And if your existing marketing and sales processes are not aligned, when things are not aligned, there's friction. When there's friction, there's bad results, period.
You heard it here. Thank you, Greg. I'm so glad that you were here today. This is for all of you listening. There will be some show notes that I've been furiously scribbling as we have been going along here. You're going to find them at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P235. That's voice of boldbusiness.com/P for program 235. You may also search the site for Death of a Salesman. Now, #VBB Radio, radio@reddirection.com. Any of our social media posts that tag Greg. Here's the scoop, everybody. It's up to you to keep this conversation going. So if you're thinking about how your sales is evolving, if you're knowing that sales must evolve, if you are trying something out and having an experience that you'd like to share, those are the conversations that create effective leadership. And we get to learn from your practical experience. So this isn't just the Jess and Greg show today. This is the Jess and Greg and you show. So we can keep this conversation going using hashtag VBB Radio. Now you're here. You've gotten this far. Make sure that you rate the program. Tell Greg and I, what did you like about the program? Give us a thumbs up. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, on our Facebook feed, on YouTube, wherever you are listening or watching. We want to know and we want to hear from you. It helps us shape the content that we bring in a way that will help you where you're at as a very busy and productive leader today. And here we go. We're going to end with this question. How will your company evolve to deal with the evolution and the death of the salesman as we know it?
The voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. When you aren't seeing the growth results you want, it's time to get an outside perspective. To discuss your specific situation around growth strategy, work with us. Visit voiceofboldbusiness.com and click Find Out More. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.